The Parable of the Foolish Decision. There was once a wise king, known for his great understanding and judgment. His kingdom was filled with peace, and his people lived in prosperity. However, as he grew older, the king's heart began to stray. He found himself surrounded by advisors who told him what he wanted to hear, rather than the truth he needed to hear. One day the king faced a critical decision. He was presented with two paths. One path led to security and peace, while the other led to risk and uncertainty. The king, listening to the flatterers around him, chose the second path, believing it would bring him greater glory and fame. At first, the path seemed full of promise. His advisors celebrated his choice, but soon trouble arose. The kingdom began to suffer, and the people grew restless. The king realized that in his pursuit of greater power and recognition, he had abandoned the path of wisdom, abandoning the counsel that had served him well for years. His kingdom, once full of peace, was now on the brink of collapse. The king, filled with regret, called for the wise men of the kingdom to offer him guidance. They told him, "Great king, wisdom has always led us to peace. Your abandonment of it has brought strife. If you return to wisdom, you will restore what was lost." With great humility, the king turned back, abandoning the path that had led him astray. He restored the wisdom of his youth, and in time, his kingdom was healed, and peace returned. King Solomon is renowned for his wisdom, granted to him by God when he asked for wisdom to govern his people. Solomon's early life and reign were filled with incredible prosperity, peace, and favor from God. His wisdom was a gift that guided him through the most difficult decisions, and people from all over the world came to hear his judgments. However, as time went on, the very wisdom that had once been his guiding light began to fade into the background as his heart wandered. In 1 Kings 11:1-4, we read about the turning point in Solomon's life. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, for they will surely turn away your heart after their gods." Despite God's clear instructions, Solomon allowed his desires to overpower his wisdom. This decision to abandon God's command for the sake of alliances and love led to his downfall. His many wives turned his heart away from the Lord, and he began to worship false gods. The very wisdom that once guided him now seemed distant, overshadowed by his pursuit of personal desires and the abandonment of God's commands. Solomon's story is a tragic reminder of what happens when we abandon the wisdom that God has entrusted to us. In our lives, we may not be kings with vast riches, but we too face choices that challenge us to hold firm to God's wisdom. When we abandon his guidance for the sake of personal gain, pride, or fleeting desires, we risk the same consequences Solomon faced: confusion, conflict, and regret. Reflecting on Solomon's story, we can ask ourselves, are there areas of our lives where we are tempted to abandon the wisdom of God for our own desires or the approval of others? Are we, like Solomon, in danger of losing the peace and clarity that comes from living according to his will? It is important to recognize that abandoning God's wisdom doesn't always happen in a single moment. It's often a gradual process, one choice at a time, until we find ourselves far from the path of peace that God intended for us. But there is hope. Just as Solomon, even in his regret, could return to God, so can we. No matter how far we stray, God is ready to welcome us back as long as we turn to him with a humble heart. In Solomon's wisdom literature, we find a timeless invitation to trust in God's guidance. In Proverbs 3:5-6, Solomon writes, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." This passage speaks directly to the heart of the dangers of abandoning God's wisdom. Solomon, who had once trusted the Lord completely, is now offering this counsel, knowing firsthand the consequences of turning away from divine guidance. The essence of this passage is a call to not rely on our own limited understanding, especially when making decisions that affect the direction of our lives. Imagine walking through a dense forest without a map. You could try to navigate on your own, but you might end up lost, confused, or stuck. This is the equivalent of leaning on our own understanding. God, however, offers us a map, His wisdom and guidance through the Scriptures and His Holy Spirit. When we trust in Him completely and submit our ways to His will, He will guide us, even when we don't see the whole picture. For those of us who are tempted to take shortcuts or abandon God's wisdom in favor of our own reasoning, this passage is a reminder that God's paths lead to peace and fulfillment, while our own paths often lead to confusion or even destruction. The key to walking in wisdom is to surrender our own understanding and trust that God's plan for us is far greater than anything we could imagine. Solomon's life is a powerful example of what happens when we abandon this trust. He started his reign trusting in God's wisdom, but eventually relied on his own understanding, leading him astray. For us, the key takeaway is that our own wisdom is limited and fallible, while God's wisdom is perfect, timeless, and sure. Take a moment to reflect. Have you been leaning on your own understanding in any area of your life? Have you been making decisions based on what seems right to you in the moment, instead of trusting God's perfect plan for you? As we move forward in this study, let's commit to embracing God's wisdom and trusting in Him with all of our hearts. He promises that when we submit to Him, He will make our paths straight. This is the invitation He extends to each of us today. In Proverbs 1:29-33, Solomon warns us of the dangers of rejecting wisdom. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease, without fear of harm. Here, Solomon paints a vivid picture of what happens when we abandon the wisdom that God offers. The passage begins with a clear warning. Those who refuse wisdom, who reject the fear of the Lord, will eventually face the consequences of their choices. Solomon speaks not just of physical destruction, but of a deeper spiritual destruction that comes when we turn away from God's guidance. In this context, wisdom is not simply a set of rules or knowledge. It's the very way of living that leads to peace and fulfillment. Abandoning it, on the other hand, leads to chaos, confusion, and ultimately destruction. God's wisdom is a protective shield, guarding our hearts and minds from the consequences of sinful choices. When we abandon it, we leave ourselves vulnerable to the attacks of the enemy, the consequences of our own foolishness, and the pain of regret. This is a painful reality for many of us, especially when we have lived through times of regret due to unwise decisions. Solomon's words, however, offer hope. They remind us that while the consequences of abandoning wisdom may be severe, there is a way back to safety, turning back to God and listening to His voice. In this verse, Solomon contrasts the outcome of those who reject wisdom with the promise of those who embrace it. Whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease, without fear of harm. When we choose to trust in God's wisdom, we are choosing peace, safety, and security. No matter how far we've strayed, the door to wisdom is always open, and God is always ready to welcome us back. Have you experienced the consequences of abandoning God's wisdom in your own life? Are there areas where you have turned to your own understanding instead of seeking God's guidance? If so, it's not too late. Wisdom is still available to you, and as Solomon promises, those who listen to God will find safety and peace. In 1 Kings 3:5-14, we encounter one of the most famous moments in Solomon's life when God offers to grant him anything he desires. Instead of asking for wealth, long life, or the death of his enemies, Solomon humbly requests wisdom to govern God's people. His prayer reveals his heart's desire to lead justly and wisely. Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. 1 Kings 3:9. God was so pleased with Solomon's request that he not only granted him wisdom, but also gave him wealth and honor beyond any king before or after him. This moment marks the beginning of Solomon's reign as the wisest man to ever live, and his wisdom became the guiding force for his decisions, from judging disputes to establishing peace and prosperity in his kingdom. Solomon's story is a powerful reminder that God is generous in granting wisdom to those who ask for it with a humble heart. In the same way that Solomon sought God's wisdom above all else, we too are invited to seek wisdom that comes from above. James 1:5 affirms this invitation. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But there is a key element to Solomon's wisdom. It wasn't just about intellectual knowledge. True wisdom comes from a heart that fears and honors the Lord. Solomon's wisdom was grounded in his reverence for God and his desire to fulfill God's will for his life. This is the kind of wisdom that transforms lives. Wisdom that isn't just about making good decisions, but about living in alignment with God's purposes. When we seek God's wisdom, we are asking for more than just guidance in our everyday choices. We are asking for a heart that truly understands His ways, His priorities, and His love. This wisdom leads to a life of righteousness, peace, and purpose, just as it did for Solomon. Reflect on this. Are you asking God for wisdom with the right heart? Do you seek His wisdom to honor Him, or do you seek it for personal gain, or to solve problems in your own way? God desires to give us wisdom, but our hearts must be aligned with His will for us to receive it fully. As we continue, let us pray for a discerning heart that seeks God's will in all things, and trust that He will provide the wisdom we need to navigate life's challenges. In Proverbs 16:18, Solomon warns us, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." Pride is a dangerous force, and Solomon, who once enjoyed immense wisdom, later saw how even the most wise can fall if they allow pride to take root in their hearts. It's a temptation that we all face at various points in life, the desire to rely on our own strength, to think we know better than God, or to believe that we can handle things without His help. The problem with pride is that it blinds us to our need for God, and when we abandon humility and trust in our own abilities, we set ourselves up for failure. Pride doesn't just come from external achievements or accolades. It also arises when we decide we don't need God's wisdom in a particular area of our lives. This self-sufficiency can lead to spiritual blindness, where we stop listening to God's voice, thinking that we already have the answers. Solomon himself, despite his wisdom, experienced the destructive power of pride. He had been blessed with everything: wealth, wisdom, and a kingdom. And yet, over time, he allowed his pride and desires to overshadow his trust in God. The warning here is clear: no matter how much wisdom or success we have, we must remain humble and reliant on God. Pride leads us away from the safety of His wisdom and towards destruction. This passage is a powerful reminder for each of us. In our walk with God, we must constantly guard against the temptation to lean on our own understanding or to rely on our own accomplishments. The moment we stop depending on God's wisdom, we open ourselves to fall into pride, which can lead to a fall that affects every area of our lives. Have you allowed pride or self-sufficiency to take hold in any area of your life? Is there a place where you've stopped depending on God's wisdom and started relying on your own understanding? If so, Take a moment to humble yourself before God and ask for His help. His wisdom is there for the taking, but it requires humility to receive it. Let us remember that true wisdom begins with humility, a humble heart that recognizes its need for God's guidance in every step we take. In James 1:5-6, the Apostle James gives a powerful promise. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. James echoes the heart of Solomon's wisdom, reminding us that the key to receiving God's wisdom is humility. Humility isn't just about acknowledging that we don't know everything. It's also about actively seeking God for guidance and trusting that He will provide. In fact, God promises to give wisdom freely to anyone who asks. But there's one condition: we must ask in faith, without doubting. This is where the challenge often lies. We may ask for wisdom, but do we truly believe that God will give it to us? Or do we doubt, thinking that our situation is too complex, or that God might not care enough to guide us? Doubt can block us from receiving the wisdom God so generously offers. When we come to God with a heart of faith and expectancy, believing that He will answer, we open the door to the transformative wisdom that leads to peace, clarity, and direction. Solomon's request for wisdom was born from humility. He didn't ask for riches or power, but for the ability to govern God's people well. God honored that humility and gave him wisdom beyond measure. In the same way, when we come before God with a humble heart, acknowledging our need for His guidance, He promises to answer us. Reflect on this. Are you asking for wisdom with faith, trusting that God will provide? Or are you doubting whether He truly cares or whether He will answer? When we approach God in humility and faith, He promises to give us the wisdom we need to navigate life's challenges. Let's take a moment to humble ourselves before the Lord and ask for His wisdom, trusting that He will guide us in every area of our lives. In 1 Corinthians 1:18-25, the Apostle Paul contrasts the wisdom of God with the wisdom of the world. He writes, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." This passage highlights a critical distinction. The wisdom of God often appears foolish to the world. The world values power, wealth, intellect, and influence. But God's wisdom operates in a completely different realm. The wisdom of God is found in the message of the cross: humility, sacrifice, and love. It challenges everything the world values, turning conventional wisdom upside down. When we choose the wisdom of the world, we often end up with temporary, superficial solutions to our problems. We may find success, but it is fleeting and does not bring lasting peace. The wisdom of the world is built on human understanding and abilities, but God's wisdom is built on His eternal truth. The cross, seemingly weak and foolish, holds the key to eternal life, peace, and salvation. Paul goes on to explain that the cross, though foolishness to the world, is the ultimate demonstration of God's wisdom and power. The world rejects this wisdom because it doesn't fit their expectations. But to those who accept it, the wisdom of God is life-changing. It gives meaning to suffering, hope in hopelessness, and strength in weakness. As we face challenges in life, we must ask ourselves, are we seeking the wisdom of the world or the wisdom of God? The world tells us to fight for ourselves, to elevate our status, to rely on our own understanding. But God's wisdom calls us to lay down our pride, to trust in His plan, and to find strength in surrender. The message of the cross challenges us to view life through God's perspective. It invites us to humble ourselves and trust in His wisdom, even when it doesn't make sense to the world around us. When we choose God's wisdom, we choose a deeper, more lasting peace that the world can never offer. Reflect on this. Are there areas in your life where you've been relying on the wisdom of the world rather than God's wisdom? What would it look like for you to embrace the wisdom of the cross in your life today? In Proverbs 3:13-18, Solomon shares the great value of wisdom and understanding. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Solomon goes on to describe how wisdom brings peace, life, and joy to those who seek it. Wisdom isn't just about making good decisions. It's about understanding life from God's perspective, recognizing His presence in every situation, and living in harmony with His will. This wisdom is a treasure that brings blessings far beyond what the world can offer. What Solomon reveals here is that wisdom has a fruitfulness to it, an ability to produce lasting results in our lives. It is a wisdom that doesn't just help us make wise choices in the short term, but leads to a life of stability, peace, and spiritual richness. Unlike material wealth, which can be fleeting, the wisdom of God produces lasting results. It produces a deeper relationship with God, a more fulfilling life, and the kind of inner peace that transcends the ups and downs of our circumstances. Solomon also emphasizes that wisdom is more precious than silver, gold, or rubies. In a world that often places value on material wealth, this is a crucial reminder. True wealth is not found in what we possess, but in the wisdom that guides our lives. Wisdom allows us to navigate the complexities of life with a heart that is aligned with God's purposes, and it leads us to true fulfillment that money and possessions can never provide. So what is the fruit of wisdom in your life? Are you experiencing the peace and joy that come from living according to God's wisdom? If not, it may be time to seek wisdom with a fresh commitment, recognizing that it is more valuable than anything else you could desire. As we reflect on this, let us ask God to fill us with His wisdom, understanding, and discernment, so that we can experience the abundant life He has promised. Congratulations! You've made it to the end of this journey, and that in itself is a remarkable accomplishment. So few people stick with the teaching all the way through, but you, my friend, have stayed until the very end. You have shown your commitment, and for that, I want to honor you. It's not easy in today's world to focus and listen to God's wisdom for so long, but you've done it, and I believe God is going to honor your effort. Now, I encourage you to show that commitment by commenting below. Let us know you've reached the end by commenting the phrase, "I am committed to wisdom," to show that you have stayed true to the study. This small act of commitment is powerful. It helps you stay grounded in your faith and keeps you connected to this spiritual journey. But there's more. Share this video with those who need to hear this message. Share it with someone who may be struggling with decisions, who needs divine wisdom in their life, or who might be walking in pride or confusion. We all know someone who is in need of the wisdom of God, and your simple act of sharing could change their life. You may be the one God is using to bring someone into a deeper relationship with Him. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Subscribing is more than just clicking a button. It's a way of saying, "I want more of God's wisdom in my life." By subscribing, you're saying, "I need His guidance daily." Many people use this channel as their source of spiritual support, especially when they don't have a church community nearby. Your subscription makes a difference, not only in your life, but in the lives of others who need to hear the message. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That simple act helps the YouTube algorithm show this message to more people who are in need of God's guidance. When you like this video, you're not just supporting us, you're helping spread God's word. Every time someone interacts with this content, it reaches more souls, and God's message grows. The key teaching today may have opened the door to a blessing in your life. Now, don't let that blessing go unused. Continue engaging with our content. This is just one of many teachings that can fuel your spiritual journey. Keep your flame alive and let this wisdom guide your steps. Finally, as we end this video, I invite you to stay still for a few minutes. Let the peace of God wash over you as you reflect on everything you've learned today. Allow the music in this video to help you enter into a moment of praise and gratitude. Take this time to thank the Lord for revealing His wisdom to you and for the direction He's offering. Don't pause the video. Stay with it to the end. Let this moment be an offering of praise and stillness, where you truly connect with the peace that surpasses all understanding. Thank you once again for being here. May God's wisdom continue to guide your path.